Hi, Marie. You're right.
Hi, I'm great, thanks. Are we live?
Yes, we
Ooh, hello everybody.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, very exciting. Um, so thank you, everybody, for who's here to join us for this session. It would be great to hear from people where they're joining today. I always love this part of the webinars. So if people could put into the chat where you are, that would be great, because it's always nice to hear that side of things. And we will kick things off very shortly. But first, I just want to do a bit of a recap of what we're going to be talking about today. And then I will hand over to our lovely panelists, Marie and Claire, to do some intros. So we're here today to talk about periods in the workplace. So still very much a taboo topic with a lot of stigma around it. And we're hoping today to help raise awareness about it. And we're going to be talking about how employers can break the stigma and how they can support their teams and raise awareness internally in their organizations on the topic. But we're also going to explore what periods are. So the different symptoms that can happen, the different conditions that can happen, and how they can impact people in different ways. Also, sorry, I forgot to mention, if you've got any questions, please can you pop them into the chat as we go as well. And then at the end, we will set aside some time to do that. Kathmandu, amazing. Hi, Nicole. Nice to see you here. Lots of different locations, which is really cool. I love this bit. This is people from all over the place, which is awesome. So I'll do a bit of an introduction for myself before I pass over to Marie and Claire. So I'm Alicia. I'm the People and Talent Lead here at Thanks Ben. So we are a platform that enables employers to issue flexible benefits to their teams. And we do a lot of work in the people space. So we do a lot of blogs and provide a lot of tools for people and organizations to support their people. So if you want to explore more of what we do following this webinar, please do check out our website, have a look at our resources, and follow us on LinkedIn so you can keep up to date with everything we're doing. Oh, nice. So many people coming through. This is great. So that's me. So I'm going to pass over to Marie and Claire, who will introduce themselves, but also give you a bit of background about why they're here today and their kind of expertise in the subject. And we can take it from there and go forward. So who's going to go first, Claire or Marie? Go on, Claire.
All right, thanks, Marie. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to meet you all and to be here. I'm Claire Knox. I'm the founder and director of See Her Thrive. And we excuse me, we're a team of business psychologists who specialise in women's health in the workplace. And I started See Her Thrive because of my own experience of living and working with premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and realised that, yes, there's still a lot of work to do around recognising and supporting female-specific health conditions in the workplace. And so now I work with organisations from startups to multinationals to help them understand these things, to raise awareness, to smash the stigma, and most importantly, to provide support and make sure that talented women and people assigned female at birth stay in the workforce.
Oh, that's my turn. Hello.
Thank you.
So I'm Marie. I work in the people team at Learnably. For context, Learnably is a performance enablement marketplace that makes companies more productive and innovative by putting learners in the driving seat so that they can upskill on what they need to perform. So like if you think of any marketplace, Etsy, eBay, any of them, we're that, but for learning resources. So whether people need a course, a book, a coach, right resource, right time, you got it. And what I do there is I work in the people team. I've said that. And my experience with periods is I have them. I also have premenstrual dysphoria disorder. And I talk about it a lot. And the more I talk about it, the more people are like, hey, more people should talk about it. Do you want to talk about it more? And I say yes. So this is me in a nutshell.
Nice. Thank you so much, both. Yeah, I've had a lot of people messaging me directly saying that they're really grateful for a session like this, and that they themselves still hide like certain conditions. And we did a bit of a survey where we got some feedback from people and their experiences of periods in the workplace, which we'll share some of the results in throughout the session. But first of all, to kick off with, let's start with the kind of basics, which is like, why should employers care about this topic? Why should it be on their radar? Marie, do you want to kick this one off for us, and then we'll pass over to Claire?
Yeah, well, let's say that if there's a solid gender split in an organization, then there's quite likely at least half of the population who has menstruations. Again, irrespective of their gender, but roughly speaking. So, okay, people roles exist as 1% of the employee population, us, looking after 80% of the budget. So that's 50% of 80% of the budget that it concerns. And we know from studies by super big consultancies like Deloitte that inclusive sentiments in companies get the ROI overall improves from 2.8 to 3.5. Like, it's incredible. So if you've got 80% of your budget, half of that is concerned by periods, and you know that if you augment the sentiment of inclusion, you're going to get better ROI. Why should you not? This is my energetic answer.
Love the passion. Very important. No, thank you so much for that. And Claire, what about you? What do you think? What's your take on it? Why should employers care about this?
Goodness me, there's so much to dive into here. Well, in the UK, certainly, and I would say on a global scale, we have got problems with attracting and retaining female talent. We know this. We've also got gender inequality at the top of our organisations, and we're trying to redress that balance. And things like periods, female-related health issues, we haven't necessarily needed to talk about them at work because we haven't had as many women making up the workforce or people who have periods. And what happens is, we've talked about stigma, we've talked about the fact that these are often silent, invisible things that people are going through and experiencing. People can experience presenteeism if they're struggling with symptoms. That means they're battling through symptoms every cycle, they're not well enough to be at work. And presenteeism is 7 times more costly to businesses than sickness absence, because it's a precursor for long-term burnout. So that's just one reason, not to mention the fact that some people are incredibly debilitated by their experience of periods. We've mentioned a couple of conditions, and we have things like very, very strict, rigid sickness absence policies that penalise a proportion of the workforce. So if you are forced to take time off 1 day a month, let's say, you'll very quickly find yourself in a performance management meeting about your sickness absence record. And so there's this bias and this discrimination that's happening that a lot of organizations aren't even aware of. So that's just a couple of things, but like I say, we could spend the whole hour talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of you mentioned there around 2 really key points, which is the inclusivity piece and the importance of that, and the ROI when you have an inclusive culture, which Marie talked about. And then Claire, you mentioned there as well the stigma that is still related around the conversation. And both of you, obviously, even from your own experiences, have talked about how periods can be debilitating and how they can really physically and emotionally impact people in the workplace. So there's kind of two areas there which we're going to delve into. The first piece, we'll start with that one, and actually it links to some of the feedback that we had in a recent survey that we put out, which is 83% of people say that filled in our survey that they don't feel comfortable talking about it at all at work. And some of those had really serious conditions as well, where we had, one person who, for example, threw up, or we've got people who, can't get out of bed because the pain is absolutely excruciating. So I wanted to kind of start with that piece, and then we'll delve more into the other side of things. So what, from your experience and from what you've seen, what are some of the misconceptions that people have, or misbeliefs about periods and how they affect people, and the impact that they can have on people in an organization? Who's going to kick this one off? Claire.
I don't mind jumping in. Yeah, I don't mind jumping in. So I think there can be a lot of trivialization and minimizing of menstrual related symptoms, and they can be dismissed as, oh, it's just your period, get a grip. It's just period pain, take a couple of paracetamol and you'll be all right. Get a hot water bottle, bring a hot water bottle into work. And this kind of attitude that is very dismissive of some of the more severe cases that we've touched upon. Similarly, we often think about, and this is a result of media advertising and things like that, we often think about just the period itself, the bleed phase, if you like. But it's so much more than that. It's a menstrual cycle, and throughout this menstrual cycle, we're experiencing hormone fluctuations, which can be wild for people like myself and Marie who have PMDD, and can trigger a range of psychological symptoms, which that won't even be on a lot of people's radars. This will be, probably a light bulb moment of, crap, I didn't even realize that was a thing. So the downplaying, the trivializing, the ignoring, the dismissing, that is something that we are working hard to overcome, because it's damaging. It's essentially you're gaslighting people, aren't you, if you're not believing their experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I actually found that piece of information I'm going to share in a skit that a friend shared with me, that periods officially can be as painful as a heart attack, except you don't die. And if someone in my team was going through that level of pain, even whether or not they die, I'm not sure they should be working. So the bottom line here is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I'm not going to go down the example route here of things that we can do but probably shouldn't. But working through the pain of a heart attack is probably one of them. And that's only for the physical side. There's a lot of conditions that are less known. I mean, one that I've heard spoken more openly about in the recent years that I'm like, yes, great, is endometriosis, which is relevant for 1 in 10 menstruators. So definitely if you're a company like over 50 people, the likelihood that someone is experiencing it in your team is pretty high. And then there's all the conditions that are less known, like, for example, fibroids, which have a similar impact on the body to endometriosis, but that 9 in 10 Black menstruators are going to experience in their lifetime. And once it starts, it doesn't go away. So there's a lot more people who go through particularly challenging periods than we know.
And you mentioned there as well, which is an element which people may not have thought of, is obviously how it can impact different ethnicities, perhaps in different ways as well, which is something else obviously to take into consideration when it comes to your diversity and inclusion, and what are you doing to improve that in your organization. And I saw somebody in the chat has also just mentioned that they have a condition in which their symptoms worsen during their monthly cycle, which can also have a really big impact. Something else that organizations should think of and take into account. In terms of doing coping with these conditions in the workplace, what, from your experiences and insights and what you've seen, what is it that, how can these conditions impact people in the workplace specifically? So what impact can they have in terms of like their actual symptoms and how they feel, and how can it impact their work? And then we can kind of look at it from the perspective of the employer following that. Marie.
Okay. Okay, I've got two anecdotes here, one that's on the more physical side and one on the more mental side that I'm sure Claire can also echo. So I'll start with the physical one because I'm a year and something into my career, and we have a physical office. Yes, this is like a few years ago. We have a physical office, but we're already a flexible company. We have like unlimited work from home, etc. And I come to the office and it's a Wednesday, and a lot of people tend to work from home on a Wednesday. And I have excruciating period cramps. I'm just in pain. And I don't know, the penny drops and I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, why am I here? We've got flexible policies left, right, and center. We speak about how mental health and physical health are equal and people shouldn't like just take the sick leave before it gets worse, etc. Like, what am I doing here? But the thing is, the answer is years, decades, centuries in the making. It's just like we're our worst gatekeepers, and I had internalized that because it's my cycle, it's my problem, and that I can't make it work for me. But that's why I think we need to be very explicit about specific challenges and it doesn't apply just to periods, but just across any inclusion initiatives. We need to specifically point out challenges, because if they are challenges in the first place, it means people don't feel that they have a right to just step up and take ownership and do what's right for them. And that's sort of on the back of that we started writing just a guidance page about periods at work that essentially says, just make it work for you. It's the same as if you're not well, you're not well. And if it's your periods, it counts just the same. So that's how it can impact people in the workplace is you don't even realize that sort of policies apply to that situation because it's just life. Well, no. And then on the more mental side of things, well, on those days, like I just would take a sick day off because I didn't have a choice. I was in bed and I couldn't get up. I was just like crying. So in that case, yeah, I think Claire might have really good insights to share on that side of the experience, and then I'll circle back.
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, so I guess aside from the physical, cognitive, and psychological symptoms that people can experience, which can and do have an impact on things like work performance, productivity, workplace relationships, I thought I would share probably the most shocking thing that I've encountered to give you an idea of the impact of some of these things and what people are experiencing at work. I spoke to someone who she was working for a large, very well-known supermarket in the UK. I'm not going to name and shame, although I would love to, but I'm not going to do that. And she, because of the mental health impact of PMDD, which she experienced, she, and 30% of people will do this, she attempted suicide. And sorry, I should have given a content warning that I was going to talk about this. And as a result, she was off work. She was absent from work. She missed her shift. Her boyfriend called to say she couldn't make it into work. When she returned to work, she was marched into an HR meeting with her line manager. And they knew that she had been hospitalized for an overdose. And they gave her no support, and she was given a disciplinary for missing her shift at work. And she was sent away with no support, no kind of mental health support, no suicide prevention support, nothing, absolutely nothing. She was berated for missing her shift at work, and she was pushed into a corner and forced to disclose PMDD, which she was experiencing. And that, as I'm sure you can imagine, was such a traumatic experience. And sadly, it's not an isolated case. I've heard from people who've been told, oh, you'll never be promoted because of your endometriosis and the fact you have to take time off. And this is happening. And it's so hard to believe in 2022, when we are doing so much for mental health and equality and things like that. People are on the receiving end of direct discrimination, which is just horrendous. It's horrendous. So sorry, that's really heavy. I just think it's really important that we're aware of the landscape and what is happening to some people.
Absolutely. And I think like the seriousness of some of these conditions, there are still so many people, like even I speak to as being somebody who works in the people space, who don't know what something like endometriosis is or PMDD. And it's this lack of awareness and understanding of what these conditions are, how common they actually are, and the serious impacts that it can have on people in the workplace. Even when we did our survey this week on people's experiences, we asked people, would you feel comfortable talking about your period at work? And we had some follow-up questions, what makes you feel uncomfortable? And it's things like, people might think I'm exaggerating the pain. And if you've got a medical condition, like if you broke your leg, people would look after you and, tell you to stay at home and rest and, things like that. But you have a condition like this, it shouldn't be any different. It's like what Marie said earlier about the kind of mental and physical health and how at Learnably, they're saying that both are just as important. And we've still got such a long way to go for people to have the same treatment with these conditions, and even just with monthly periods as they are, which come with terrible cramps and can really vary from person to person. Some of the other feedback we had was fear of judgment. Everybody goes through it. Taboo, people thinking it's a gross topic, making people feel uncomfortable. Like we had reoccurring kind of themes throughout the feedback as well, which is why we're here, right? To help kind of raise awareness and be like, no, we need to stamp out these stigmas. Marie, sorry, did you have a question that you wanted to go for it?
Yeah, no, I heard you mention on endometriosis and PMDD and that some people don't know what it is. So I thought I'll just take a second to define what they are. And tell me if I'm wrong also, because I'm not a doctor. So to my knowledge and my Google searches and testimonials, various testimonials, and endometriosis is when the lining in your uterus grows, but then attaches to other organs. And so when it's your periods, the lining sheds, and that's also why you're bleeding. But to shed, it sort of creates little cramps to be off the walls. But it does that with all of your organs because it's attached, because the lining has grown to your colon, your intestine, and so it's your entire body that turns into a giant cramp where it's not supposed to. So that's for endometriosis. And for premenstrual dysphoria, I think it's fair to start with premenstrual syndrome, which is experiencing just intense, anything from sadness to anger, just what's generally labeled mood swings that a lot of people experience. And then there's about a quarter, 1 in 20, about a quarter, a little under a quarter of people who experience premenstrual dysphoria, which is basically when your hormones go into a cycle, it blocks the serotonin from reaching your brain. So you get really, really, really depressed until the right bits can reach the right parts of your brain again. It's really not a matter of mindset. It's proper depressive episode. So that's my 2 cents on what they are. But I can see in the chat people are hungry for actionable insights now. They're like, so I'm going to pass it back to you.
Oh, well, before we kind of move on to the next section, I did have a question, which was, we know that endometriosis is 1 in 10. Do we know what it is for something like PMDD? Do you guys have insight into that?
5 to 8% of people who have a menstrual cycle, it's likely to be higher than that because these conditions go undiagnosed, misdiagnosed. People live with them for many, many years. We've got a whole host of other conditions that we haven't mentioned. Polycystic ovary syndrome, 1 in 10. Fibroids, Marie mentioned. But yeah, I mean, we're just tapping the surface here. These are just a few, but there are so many different gynecological and menstrual health related conditions that affect, I think it's around 1/3 of the female population are thought to be living with some kind of reproductive health issue in England, which is, yeah, we're talking millions of people.
Yeah, and also just as an aside, when we say women, it's also anyone who identifies as women or trans women out there can experience period symptoms.
Yeah, it's a really important point as well. Goes back to the diversity and inclusion piece and awareness and understanding in the subject as well. Okay, brilliant. And yeah, there's quite a few really good questions coming in. Please do, by the way, keep sending your questions through, and we will make our way through them. And a couple of people have asked for resources that have been mentioned from the discussion so far. We will share these in the chat, and we'll also send up an email as well to participants to share the resources there, so you can use them and have a look at them. Go on, Claire.
I wonder if it would be useful, given that we've probably got quite a few HR people on the call today, just to circle back while we're talking about conditions, and give you a bit of knowledge. When these symptoms are severe with something like endo, PMDD, polycystic ovary syndrome, even menopause, they can meet individual grounds for being a disability. And that's really important for you to be aware of, because as an employer, you, under the Equality Act, have a duty of care to provide support and accommodations. And we have seen employment tribunals involving menopause and endometriosis. And I think, again, that's something that probably isn't on the radar of lots of people. But yes, these conditions can be so severe that they can be classed as a disability. So from an HR perspective, a line manager perspective, that's just something to have on your radar.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, absolutely. Really important for people to understand like what it means from the HR perspective as well. So looking at it from the employer's side of things, and somebody put a question about this as well in the chat. How can employers begin to raise awareness to break the stigma? If they're starting from square one, they haven't done anything yet, they want to do something and they don't really know where to begin. What would you both advise, given your experience and what you've seen kind of work before? Who started last time? I've forgotten now.
I don't mind diving into this.
Yeah, go for it.
So what can work really well actually is a conversation starter, and that's the aim of the game initially. You want to open up that conversation, give people permission to talk about these things. It's something like we're doing today, and I've delivered a lot of webinars that talk about periods and female health conditions, and just give people the time and space to learn about these things, to ask questions, to share their own experiences. And it can be transformative really in just lifting the lid on these things that are often you know, surrounded by stigma and very much under the radar. So that, I think, as a kick-off, is something that's really easy to organise. A 1-hour webinar, let's talk about periods at work. And that can be a really, really good thing to do. Beyond that, and it really depends on your organisation. Some companies we've worked with have shared bits of information through their like internal comms, Slack channels, women's networks, things like that. Again, it's about getting that conversation going. And once you give people permission to talk about these things, that conversation keeps, it's very much alive. Yeah, so that's Marie. I'll hand over to you.
Okay, sorry, I've just seen a question in the chat that I think is really interesting, but we'll pick that up later. Okay, first, I would say getting leadership buy-in, like find an executive sponsor, bring all of the numbers that we bombarded you with at the beginning. If you need to put a slide together, but like prove the commercial value of it and get buy-in from your execs so that it can scale and it can last and it can have the impact that you need it to be. You need buy-in, and then you need a web of champions everywhere. So Claire, you've mentioned like employee groups, employee resource groups. If you experience it yourself, then you can be the founder of it. If you don't, then you can find someone who's already a little bit vocal and give them the opportunity to be the founder of that circle where people can share safely and create their own initiatives as well, like take ownership of their experience. Yes to bringing it up in one-to-ones. Yes to like sparking conversations. Flexible working also. I mean, like, again, specifically talking to periods at work, like it's okay to be flexible in that specific lens. You can leverage the news. I mean, it's going to be a legal obligation in Spain very soon, if it's not already. So that can be like a good lever. And then in terms of health support, yes, I saw someone in the chat mention like putting stash in the toilets or in a cupboard somewhere. Like, it's a very small investment for the company, but it can have a very big impact in people's lives. And then, mental health support. We're with a provider called Oliva, who do unlimited free discretionary therapy for all of our employees, with like super smooth UX and like matching based on what kind of therapy you need. Healthcare cashback support. I've seen people share experiences of, because they had healthcare support, they were able to get diagnosis and then to afford treatment, which they might not have otherwise. And then just keep educating yourself, like coming to webinars like this. It's great.
Just to jump on something Marie said, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Leveraging the news and the media, something to add to that is the year is peppered with awareness days and months that really do give such a great opportunity to talk about these things. So as an example, September is Polycystic Ovary Syndrome Awareness Month and Gynecological Cancer Awareness Month. October, we've got World Menopause Day. March, we've got International Women's Day. So have a look at those awareness days, if you like, and those events. Get out your wellbeing calendar or your D&I calendar and see where you can weave things in naturally. And then you're going to leverage what's happening in the media, all of the buzz, and it will feel probably more organic, if you like, because you're not just doing it at a random time. Yeah, but that can work really well as well.
Yeah, we at Ben, we started with the policy to help kind of do the initial awareness, and then doing a blog about it, and then obviously something like this, whether it's through your own organization or through another one, which can also help with those. But yeah, linking to various events to help raise awareness. There are so many important topics these days, of course, which is really important and great that people are celebrating them and working to educate themselves and others about them, which is awesome. So great. So that's kind of led us into like how companies can actually support employees in the workplace. So Marie, obviously you touched on the mental health and the private medical insurance and flexible working. Is there anything else that either of you would add in terms of how a company can actually support their teams who may be suffering from severe condition when it comes to the menstrual cycle, or just periods, general periods in general? Or are there any organizations who you've seen do this and do it really well? And what is it in particular that they do well? And then we'll go through some of the questions to wrap up. Claire, should we go first with this one?
Yeah, so there are lots of things that employers can do, and I think we've touched upon quite a few. One thing I would really recommend, and again it comes back to what I talked about earlier, is looking at things through the lens, looking at policies, looking at practices through the lens of an employee living with a cyclical, fluctuating chronic health condition, somebody that might be forced to take time off regularly. Are your policies and practices disadvantaging or discriminating against those employees? And this extends beyond periods. This could be people who have IBS, who have chronic migraine, who have fibromyalgia. There are so many chronic health conditions that are fluctuating, they're not linear, and yet we still tend to manage our people in a very linear way. So particularly things like sickness absence, look at the way that's managed. Do you have this trigger-based absence management system whereby somebody who is off for 1 day a month will end up with a worse score than somebody who is off for 4 or 5 days consecutively? If the answer to that question is yes, you are discriminating against everyone in your organization who has a chronic, fluctuating, cyclical health condition. So that, I think, is a plea from me. Please go away and look at that. Manager training is something that I think all organizations can benefit from. And that really is to raise awareness of some of the things we've talked about. But more than that, it delves into what those reasonable accommodations might look like, how to have conversations, how to be empathic, particularly if these things, if you're never going to experience periods yourself, how do you show empathy? How can you empathize with something you don't understand and you're never going to embody? And the employment law piece as well, which is really, really important. So I think manager training really sends out a strong signal that it's something you recognize in the organization, you're taking it seriously, you are investing in the females in your organization, you want to support them. We've talked about policy. I do have a personal view of menstrual leave policies, and I don't think that's the right way to go. What I would love to see is a whole rebrand of sickness absence to well-being days, where people, they're not penalized for being off sick, but they're actually, empowered to take a day for their well-being when they need it. Change in language, change in perspective, but very, very powerful, and I think would totally change the way that businesses operate, and a lot of cultural stuff that can be a huge barrier. So yeah, I don't want to rabbit on. I'll pass over to Marie.
No, thanks for sharing, Claire. I totally like a big +1 for me on everything that you've just shared. In my team, we really love product methodologies. So we're not a product team, but we work like a product team. And so I was thinking about what we were all saying around like the things that we can do. And I think if we peel it back to a first principle, it's how can we give everyone in our companies the freedom and the responsibility to do their best work. So I mean there's a lot that takes like trust and like all of the actionable tips that Claire you've just shared, time off, like switching the narrative and so on. But I think that's how I like to look at it, is freedom and responsibility to do your best work. And so what people need to do that, how the hell am I supposed to know? I'm not everybody. So ask your people. Like that's how, when we started talking about periods at work, I was like, hey, who wants to talk about this? Because I don't know who's got periods. It's not like because you present female that you've got periods and the other way around. So and also not everyone who has periods is interested in like getting into that kind of work. So asking people what they need, what they want, then doing the legwork as the people team and getting feedback on that so that you keep iterating and meeting their needs in a way that enables them to do their best work. What that might look like, because we've talked about time off a lot, and sometimes like depending on your culture, on your size and so on, there's various ways that this can look, and it's not going to necessarily be sick leave or well-being days, or like as Claire mentioned, there's a lot of different variations of that. So yes to having like a period specific leave, but on the other hand, maybe some people feel shy. If 86% of the people that Alicia asked are like too scared or shamed or whatever to talk about periods at work, who's going to actually like action that period policy of if it's actual time off? So I like the idea of it. I'm not sure, I've not done it, but in practice, I think there can be like blockers that we inherit as a society. Another thing that can be an alternative is duvet days, which is what we have at Learnably, which is you've got 2 days, you can use them in half days if you want. They're jokers across the year, no questions asked, no like last minute. It might be a period, it might be a hangover, I don't know, and I don't need to know. I took one of those very recently because I was like, I just want to cry all the time, and I don't think I can do my best work if I cry. Like, so that's another alternative. The fall down of that is, yeah, but also it's not going to spark the conversation in the same way that an actual period policy would. So there's plus and minus on anything that you're going to put in place, and that's why you really need to look at what's the context you're operating in, what are your people telling you, what is it that they need, and what is it that your company needs. So that's my 2 cents.
I think both of you as well touched upon something which is a really good point, which is the inclusivity of the language behind your flexible working policies or flexibility policies and your sick policies as well. So I think there's a few questions in the chat I've noticed about people saying like, how can you make sure you're not getting special treatment? And there's somebody who works in an all-male team who's not sure how to handle it, or how do you handle it without giving everybody an additional day off and not others? So that kind of disparity. So
sorry, I will intervene here. That is the definition of equity, is that you give people what they need on the basis of what they need. If you're not experiencing the pain of a heart attack on a monthly rolling basis while crying your eyes out, you don't need a day off.
Yes.
I did not ask for this.
So I think what people are saying is like,
isn't it? Nobody wants to take time off. There is nothing worse than not being able to show up.
Otherwise, you've got an engagement issue and a trust issue, but not a period issue. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody's put in the chat as well a question around how do you, hang on, I'm just finding the exact question so I get my, here we go. Oh, there's another one that's come through recently as well. In our company, we have 5 days of paid sickness leave we have per year. Is that discriminatory?
I'm not sure, is that over and above statutory, or there are more questions, I think, and it would depend on where in the world the company is and things like that. So I think it's impossible to answer that without more knowledge.
And context behind. Okay. Let's go with another one related to the leave question while we're on it then. So let's just see. Here we go. Okay. How do you tackle more of a flexible sick leave for people who need 1 day off a month, for example?
I think Marie's answered that so eloquently already. You empower people to take what they need when they need it. It's trust. The number of people, I think one of the concerns is, oh, but people are bound to take the mick with that, aren't they? They're bound to take advantage of it. In reality, you might have, what, 1, 2 people who are dishonest, who will push the boundaries, who will spoil it for others. But they are few and far between, or I would like to think, I mean, I am an optimist and I wear rose-tinted glasses, so maybe I live in Oz, but those people, you know, they're probably not going to be in your organization for long if they don't fit with a culture of trust and honesty, and that's what you're trying to build. But empowering people to, we're adults, you know, we're adults, and it really, this starts from a very young age, doesn't it? This applauding people for having 100% attendance. I remember at school, I would miss school for my periods. I would have to take days off or go home. My mum had to pick me up sometimes because I was just doubled over in agony. And I would be the one in assembly who didn't get the certificate for 100% attendance and stuff. And I'm like, do you know what? I can't help it. I'm not choosing this. And now it's like kids get to go to Lightwater Valley and Alton Towers if they're in 100% of the time. Can we stop doing that, please? Because it's breeding this culture of, you know, we can't get sick, we can't fail, we can't be broken, we can't experience pain. It's BS. We are human. The human condition is we suffer, we break. If you don't want that, transform everything digitally. There you go. But if you're working with people, embrace people for people.
I feel like that deserves a little round of applause, that speech. Yeah.
Full box out there.
Boom. Yeah, all done. That's it. Awesome. No, thanks so much, Claire. Yes, Kashtia, it is being recorded, and we're going to send out the recording. We've got a bit of context, by the way, on the leave question, which is that they're a UK-based company. If you take more than 5 days sickness, you would move to SSP, according to their policy. So that just gives a bit more kind of insight into that one as well. But I think Marie has covered that in more detail than you yourself, Claire. With ours as well, we talk a lot at Ben about like the flexible working and the trust that comes behind that. So like we put in our policy things like, you know, you may need to take extended breaks, or, you know, you may need to finish early, or you do what you need to do that works for you, because everybody's impacted from a different way. And in our policy, we've listed out all the different options available to people, and that includes things like the mental health support and the private medical insurance and the sick leave that they can take with it, and everything like that. So we'll share that shortly in the chat as well, along with some other resources. Yeah.
And on the back of that, as long as you've got a very solid performance process and you know what good performance looks like, and you give people the freedom, which is everything you've just spoken to. Sorry, I don't know what's going on in the background. and I lost the trail. So freedom, everything you've spoken to, the flexibility, the empowerment, the policies, everything that we've just spoken about. And then on the other hand, you've got your clear, what does good performance looks like? And if you're not meeting all expectations, let's talk about it. How can I help you? How can we help you meet all expectations? And then you go back to what are the adjustments needed, or what is the guidance needed? Do you have clarity over what good looks like? It doesn't mean that we don't talk about performance in a very structured, clear, and responsible way. On the flip side, goes hand in hand.
And just to jump in, I think one perspective we haven't really covered, and it's massively important. The full responsibility for this is not on employers, and it's not on people managers, and it's not on the people team. People living with these things have a responsibility to look after themselves as well, and to find out what works for them as individuals. And that can be, for many of us, that's part of the journey, and it's part of the condition and figuring all of that out. It can take a long time to actually sit down and think, well, actually, I can't work like that because it just doesn't work for me, but I can work like this. As an example, I work in 2-week sprints because that fits my good days when I'm performing at my best. I can still do stuff in those other 2 weeks, but my critical, high impact, high energy, high stakes work, I know to schedule that in a certain couple of weeks. And so it's really important, I think, as well, to have coaching conversations with people and to encourage them to come up with their own coping strategies, to also encourage them to get medical intervention if that's what's needed. So we know that a lot of people experience things like medical gaslighting, and they might tell you, well, I've been backwards and forwards to the GP and I'm getting nowhere. Well, encourage them to go back. If you've got private medical insurance, encourage them, signpost them to that. But there has to be, you as an employer you can't take all of this responsibility on. It has to be a collaboration. It has to be working together.
Amazing. Thanks, Claire. Marie, were you going to add something there? No.
No. I just very much echo everything you've said. Yes, to enabling adult to adult relationships. This is like anything else would be quite paternalistic. It's not a nice feeling.
Thank you so much, both. So I'm just conscious of the time. So any further questions, please do pop them in the chat. We've got about 5 minutes left, but I just wanted to finish up with any particular final points, key takeaways. If you had to, well, let's narrow it down, like top 3 recommendations that you would pass on to the audience and people who are here, and then we'll share the resources that we've been talking about in the chat as well. Marie?
Okay. Should we I do 3 or 1 and 1 and 1 and 1? I'll start with 1. It is whoever you need to convince in your organization to have the influence that you need and want to have, speak their language, whatever their language might be. If it's super commercial, only numbers, leverage the numbers that we shared. There's a lot of commercial insights in this webinar. Just model your language around theirs so you can get buy-in. That's number 1. Claire, what's your number 1?
I think one of the messages to come out today, and one of the things I would love for people to take away, is empowering people to show up at work their full selves, warts and all. We are beautifully broken and imperfect, and work can be such a vital source of support if only we can feel safe and be vulnerable. And So leaning into that in whatever works for you and your organisation, and however you want to do it with the resources you've got, is a step in the right direction. That's a bit high level and vague. I will try and be more specific for my next one.
No, I think it's well, I find it specific, and also it inspires me through my next. Apparently, the whole town is on fire. I'm sorry. It's like different types of sirens. I hope everyone's okay. So you said encourage everyone to show up authentically. And so to put your money where your mouth is in your ways of working, you can start applying UX methodologies and invite your users, your employees, to share their experience and co-create their experience of work. That's my second takeaway. And so, yeah, back to you, Claire.
Yeah, my next one is building on that. I think from what you hear, what you observe, what people tell you they want, what they're hungry for, what they need, then look at things like webinars to raise awareness, look at things like appointing champions, look at what those practical things might be. Yes, you can do it kind of top down and open up the conversation that way. It's still a really great way to do things. But if it's bottom up and if it's employee led, then it can be even more powerful. I know we get contacted a lot by members of the people team who say, you know, employees are asking for education around menopause or so listen and use that. Yeah, but get that conversation started. Give, you know, if people are hungry for it, give people what they want.
Nice, thanks, Claire. And my last takeaway is going to be put your oxygen mask on first. Just do what's right for you. To create adult to adult conversation starts with being your own adult. So if you need answers by taking time off, or if you need the support of a therapist, or if you need to see a doctor, or that is what is then going to enable you to share your story and to have an impact at scale, step after step, conversation after conversation. And back to Claire.
No pressure. No pressure. Go back to policies, practices. Take however long you've got to do that through the lens of people who will need time off. And I'm talking about all people. We've all got shit going on, whether it's periods, whether it's we're going through divorce, separation, grief, fertility treatment, whatever it is, at different times in our working life, we are all going to need some flex and some support. Are your policies, practices, is your culture stiff and rigid and designed for a factory, you know, or is it really empowering and supporting people to be human, and be kind? You know, we never know what someone else is going through. We don't. They might not talk about it. You may never know. Some people don't want to talk about it. That's fine. We respect that. But be kind. Just, yeah, people are fragile, and just look after each other. We've got too much hate and war and horrible stuff. Just be kind.
Thanks so much, Claire. And thank you so much, Marie. And everybody who joined us today, thank you so much. I know there are some questions that we haven't quite had time to go over, but we'll be sending out resources, and please do have a look at those. And you know where we all are. Claire from See Her Thrive, and Marie from Learnably, and myself from Ben. And we'll be posting additional content on LinkedIn to follow up as well for everybody. So thank you so much. And guys, thank you. That was amazing and really insightful and so useful. So cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Bye.